Have you ever wondered if you could literally just think your way into a better life? It's a pretty bold question, right? But what if your daily mindset isn't just some reaction to your circumstances, but the actual architect of them? Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking Norman Vincent Peale's classic work, The Power of Positive Thinking. But we're looking at it through a very specific lens, as a highly practical, surprisingly modern toolkit for overcoming the sheer, exhausting overwhelm of today's frantic world. Okay, let's dive right into this.
Here's our game plan. First, the power of belief. Then, generating peace and energy. Third, the cure for worry. Fourth, becoming someone people like. And finally, breaking through any obstacle. We'll be moving sequentially, starting with fixing our internal mindset and then working our way out to conquering those external, real-world challenges.
All right, Section 1, the power of belief and overcoming self-doubt. To cure that profound, paralyzing self-doubt, Peale argues that we absolutely have to re-educate our minds. We need to turn them into power-producing plants rather than, factories of fear. Picture this, an 85% success rate. That is exactly what one miserable, deeply insecure traveling salesman actually achieved in a single week. He realized that as he drove around between his sales calls, his mind was just totally saturated with fear and defeat. So he changed his inputs. He literally put a pack of index cards in his car's glove compartment with faith-based affirmations written on them. One of them read, "If you have faith, nothing shall be impossible unto you." He memorized them as he drove. By intentionally changing those thought patterns, his insecurities just vanished. And in his very first week of trying this method, he closed the sale on 85% of his calls. Incredible, right?
And that story brilliantly illustrates Peale's core premise, which is wonderfully summed up by this Ralph Waldo Emerson quote, "They conquer who believe they can." Peale really emphasizes that positive thoughts actively create confident realities. But here's the catch. The reverse is also terrifyingly true. If you constantly dwell on dire worst-case scenarios, you tend to create, by the sheer power of your own thoughts, the exact conditions that you fear the most.
Which brings us to the physical reality of our modern day-to-day lives. Ask yourself right now, honestly, do you ever fume and fret? And by fume, I mean to boil up, to blow off steam, to be agitated. And fret is like that petulant half-cry of a sick child in the middle of the night. Are you constantly boiling over with that kind of underlying agitation as you go about your day?
Moving into Section 2, generating peace and energy. As Peale rightly points out, it usually isn't the hard work itself that drains our physical energy, it's the emotional upheaval. Notice this crucial contrast here. We so often live at this frantic, exhausting, fume and fret tempo. And this feverish pace literally tears our minds and bodies to shreds. Peale contrasts this with what he calls the God-ordered pace. Think about it. The universe moves slowly, smoothly, imperturbably, and with absolute perfect organization. When we can synchronize our personal speed with this smooth, unhurried pace, we inherently conserve our vital energy.
So how do we actually get to that pace? Well, Peale offers a daily prescription to empty the mind of the fears and regrets that cause those expensive energy leaks. First, find 15 minutes of absolute silence every single day. Second, conceive of your mind as the surface of a body of water and make it so perfectly still there isn't even a tiny ripple. Third, once you're perfectly quiescent, listen for the deeper sounds of harmony. Doing this mental catharsis stops the drain on your physical vitality.
Let's jump into Section 3, the cure for worry. Peale notes something fascinating. The word worry actually comes from an old Anglo-Saxon word that means to choke. And honestly, that is exactly what worry does, isn't it? It literally chokes off our potential and can manifest as very real physical illnesses, everything from high blood pressure to chronic pain.
To cure this, Peale introduces a truly brilliant concept called imagineering. This is the deliberate use of mental images to build factual results. Basically, if you hold a picture in your mind with sufficient faith, it tends to become reality. Peale suggests physically visualizing your worry draining away. Picture your mind like a basin of water, pull the stopper, and watch the fear and insecurity literally drain right out of you while you consciously affirm that you are emptying your mind. Now, once that worry is drained, you have to replace it with something. Here's Peale's 3-step creative formula, which was actually used by a businessman who started with a tiny hole-in-the-wall establishment and turned it into a massive success. First, Prayerize. Talk over your daily decisions simply and directly, almost as if you have a divine partner sitting right there in your office. Second, Picturize. Print a firm, successful image of your goal on your mind. And third, Actualize, which happens almost automatically when you hold on to that positive picture tenaciously.
If you need a more physical daily habit to get you to stop worrying, look at this highly actionable technique. There was a chronic warrior who was making himself totally sick by constantly rehashing his daily decisions. So he came up with an evening ritual. Before leaving his office, he would physically tear off the day's calendar page, roll it into a tight little ball, and drop it straight into the wastebasket. He would say a quick prayer, handing his mistakes and successes over, leaving the day entirely in the trash and pressing forward to tomorrow. It's so simple, but so effective.
Now let's shift our focus outward for a second. What makes a person truly likable? We all have this fundamental human drive to be appreciated, right? But popularity sought purely for its own sake. It's superficial. So what is the actual, true root of authentic human connection?
That brings us to Section 4, Becoming Someone People Like. Let's look at Peele's surprisingly simple philosophy for naturally drawing people toward you rather than subconsciously erecting all these invisible barriers that push them away. To really anchor this concept, Peele shares the deeply moving story of Ralston Young, famously known as Red Cap Number 42 at Grand Central Station. Now, he carried baggage for a living, but his real job? Spreading love. One day, he wheeled an elderly, tearful woman to her train. Noting her pain, he deliberately chose to build her up, complimenting her hat and dress, and promising to pray for her. A year later, her daughter actually returned to tell Ralston that his intentional kindness in that fleeting moment had brought her mother profound peace in her final days. Just a beautiful example of human connection. Peele distills this kind of likability down to a few very actionable steps. First, be a comfortable person, someone easygoing, like an old shoe, without those stiff, unapproachable barriers. Second, deliberately build up other people's egos, because when you elevate someone else's self-esteem, genuine affection naturally flows right back to you. Third, remember their names. And finally, and this is a tough one, pray for people you literally dislike. Peele explains that holding on to resentment blocks your own spiritual power and makes your entire personality scratchy and unpleasant to be around.
All right, our final section, Section 5, Breaking Through Any Obstacle. So how do we take this newly fortified internal mindset out into a world that is just full of immovable external challenges? Consider the stark contrast between two mindsets in the corporate world. Peele describes the obstacle man. We all know this guy, the person who immediately finds all the hazards and lists all the reasons a project is absolutely going to fail. When he demanded to know how another successful executive handled obstacles, the executive simply replied that he removes them and then forgets them. He showed the obstacle man a card in his wallet that read, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." He literally bypassed hurdles entirely just by having the faith, the positive expectation, and the guts to tackle them head-on.
To become a possibility thinker yourself, Peele insists we use powerful affirmations, like, "I don't believe in defeat." He advises repeating this aloud until it totally dominates your subconscious mind, because your attitude entirely dictates the power an obstacle has over you. If you view a hurdle as merely a mental rough patch, you strip it of its power and you can face difficulties like a true champion.
But to get there, you absolutely must root out what Peele calls the little negatives. These are those offhanded comments that clutter up our daily conversations. You know the ones, "What if I get a flat tire? I'm afraid I'll be late. I don't really think I can do that." You have to weed these out immediately because a mass of little negatives rapidly snowballs, seeping deep into your subconscious and creating a concrete negative reality.
And look at the sheer power of reversing those negatives, illustrated by this 90-day time frame. A woman was facing what seemed like an immovable obstacle. Her husband asked for a divorce. Following her minister's advice, she deferred the decision for 90 days. Instead of sitting around despairing, she used those 90 days for intense positive visualization. She literally visualized him sitting in his old chair reading, fixing things around the house, playing golf with her. She completely replaced her nagging negativity with an image of harmony. And guess what? Before the 90 days were even up, her expected positive attitude literally reconstructed her marriage. He ultimately couldn't even imagine leaving her.
Which brings us to the climax of this explainer. What is your most burning desire? Peele insists that positive thinking absolutely needs a specific direction. You cannot expect the best if you're just thinking aimlessly. If you want to get anywhere in life, you have to make a clear-cut decision about exactly what you want. Photograph that specific goal on your mind and hold it there tenaciously. I want to leave a lingering impact with this core philosophy from Peele. Life cannot deny itself to the person who gives life his all. When you are deeply self-reliant, wildly optimistic, and you undertake your work with the absolute assurance of success, you quite literally magnetize your condition. You draw the creative powers of the universe directly to you. So, I'll leave you with this final, provocative question to think about. If you utilize this modern toolkit and literally emptied your mind of every single negative thought tonight, what could you achieve tomorrow? The power is entirely in your hands, or rather, it's in your mind. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I seriously challenge you to put these tools to the test today. Catch you next time.